Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar. If you can teach music online, you're ready for pretty much anything. Effective strategies for teaching music online with Dr. Carol Johnson. My name is Frances and I'm delighted to be here today. But first I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the many countries throughout Australia and from where you are all joining us today. I acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of the lands, waters upon which I am lucky enough to live, work and play here in Sydney. I pay my deep respects to their elders, past, present and future, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples joining us today. If you would like to, I encourage you to share where you are joining us from in the chat. So currently on screen is a blue PowerPoint slide with a gold semicircle in the top right corner. There's some gold, orange and white text and video boxes with our guest speaker, Carol, and Auslan interpreter, Shavoy. I am a woman in my early 30s with fair skin, straight blonde hair, blue eyes, and today wearing a collared, pale pink and black spotty dress. In the background is my living room. You can see some plants, my couch, and some colourful artworks on the walls behind me. These sessions have been designed and produced for you and explore the topics of leadership, artistic, and digital adaptation. Thank you for continuing to join us for these live webinars, and we hope that the recordings of the sessions are proving to be a useful tool to refer back to as we navigate these ever-changing times together. But before I hand over to Carol, I wanted to bring your attention to phase 2 results of our Audience Outlook Monitor. Our research team at Australia Council has been working with pattern makers and Wolf Brown to understand the changes in behaviours and sentiments of art goers in the wake of COVID-19. And phase 2 results highlight some really interesting findings, including audiences are increasingly ready to return to attend cultural events in most locations as soon as permitted. But also with this said, 40% of people would still prefer a digital platform right now rather than attending in person. There has also been an interesting increase in people willing to pay for online experiences since they were last surveyed in May. If you want to find out more, you can attend a webinar next Wednesday, the 29th of July, or download the report from our website. We'll post the link now. So a quick reminder of housekeeping before we begin. Live captioning is available via Zoom and can be toggled on or off using the CC button, either at the bottom or the top of your screen. As always, please use the chat function to engage with each other and share any thoughts, ideas and links throughout today's webinar. We'll be posting in there too. Similarly, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A button rather than posting your question in the chat, just so we don't lose it as we go, and we can answer any questions at the end of today's session. Today, we're joined by Shavoy, our Auslan interpreter, who will be here with us throughout. Thank you, Shavoy, for being here. And finally, a recording of today's webinar with a transcript will be available after the session around mid next week, which we'll send to you via email along with the PowerPoint and any resources from today. So now on screen is a navy blue PowerPoint slide to introduce our guest speaker. There is a title to introduce Carol. Next to her headshot, a close-up of a woman with fair skin, long dark brown hair, wearing gold hoop earrings, a black top and smiling at the camera. He is in front of a light coloured background and the image is in square cropped format. Carol is the founder of the Virtual School of Music, and she founded this back in 2006. So it's really fitting that she's here today to talk to us about strategies for teaching music online. This is her bread and butter. So Carol has a PhD from the University of Melbourne Conservatorium of Music, and her research has evidenced exponential increase at the undergraduate level, exponential increase of online music course offerings at the undergraduate level, and the urgent need for a shift in thinking from music instructors, students, and policymakers when developing online music teaching methods. Today, Carol will talk to us through some of the key strategies for practical implementation when teaching music online. He will share some supportive, interactive online teaching techniques, and we'll even get a little taste of some of the online teaching tools that she uses that you can take away and utilize across any of your online teachings. Carol, thank you so much for joining us today to share some of your practical tips. I'll now hand over to you and I'll share your slides.
Thanks, Frances. What I've noticed is that my hair is a little longer in COVID. My bright pink scarf that I'm wearing this morning is hopefully a little bit more cheery than just the black t-shirt. It's wonderful to be here with everybody this morning. And I'm looking forward to our short time together. And I'm sure that everybody's wondering how you're teaching music online, especially as I'm teaching at the University of Melbourne in the Melbourne Conservatorium of Music. We've, in our Master of Music Performance teaching, we've made the decision to put all of our classes to the online space for semester 2. So I'm sure that everybody else is in a similar situation, especially at the tertiary level, how we're addressing that. So what I wanted to do in our short time together is come forward with some overarching questions. And one of the big ideas that I want you to take away with is just one big idea that's practical for you and that you can actually implement maybe in your next music class that you're teaching. The second overarching question that I think is really important is that you take away 2 or 3 ideas that you can see maybe down the road in the next 6 months to a year that you could implement. So with that in mind, let's take a little bit of a deep dive into how to teach music online. I'm going to, moving forward, we're going to look at a brief overview of online learning so we can kind of get the lay of the online learning land, and then how we can design for teaching presence. Important part of teaching music online is actually having presence and feeling like you're communicating just as you would in an ensemble, but you're not next door to your neighbor, you're actually talking through a screen. And a camera. So that's a really important aspect. And then we'll look at some technology and have an opportunity to try out some technology, as well as look at communicating presence in the online environment for music. So as we move forward, let's talk about just some definitions to start us out. So back in the 80s and 90s and 2000s, e-learning was kind of the way that we described learning online. So e-learning is still that big umbrella term. And then we have online learning, which actually is 80% to 100% of the learning time happens in the online environment. The blended learning part is that space in between, more of a sweet spot really, and it's 30% to 79% happens in the online environment. And then face-to-face, of course, we're familiar with face-to-face traditional teaching of music, but sometimes we forget that face-to-face also means it's up to 29% that can happen online. So that might mean that students are accessing videos, they're accessing different kind of PDFs or music online, different things like that. As we move forward, I want us to get kind of a lay of the land in the Australian landscape of learning online. And I have a chart on the screen there, and you can see that in 2016 we had over 1.4 million students that were in tertiary, and almost 400,000 of those were taking some kind of external or mixed mode of teaching. In Australia, the definition of online learning is not specific to the tertiary statistics that we get. So you have to consider that some of those may not be fully online. They may be a different form of distance or external mode of teaching. In 2017, we had an increase. 2018 continued that increase to 1.56 million. And of course, 2019 hasn't been released. And here we are in 2020, and pretty much everybody at the tertiary level is teaching online. But to couch it in how music is being taught online here in Australia, I finished a study putting all of the data together in just recently here in 2020, and it looked at how many institutions were teaching a tertiary music class for Bachelor of Music students online. Out of the 42 institutions here in Australia, we only have 7 institutions that were teaching 1 or more. Of those 7 institutions, 5 of them were only teaching 1 or 2 online music classes at the tertiary level, and they were electives, they weren't core for their Bachelor of Music students. So this is really an important time to understand that in the last few months, we've really done a huge lift and shift of our perspective of how music can be taught online, literally overnight. So as we look to moving into how we teach online, we need to think about our ways of learning. And before we get too far, I want us to focus on some of the approaches we use for learning in practice-based discipline. So specifically the approaches that I'm listing here talk about experiential learning, which a researcher named Kolb describes these experiences as moving from the concrete to the observation, and then to the reflection part, and then to moving into a formal abstract concept, and then into how you can relate it into your scenario. So that experiential piece is a really important part of student learning, because they're going to see, hear, touch, exchange with their learning content. In scaffolding, Wiggins and McTeague highlight the importance of strategically building content knowledge or motor skill ability, which was really important in music learning. Scaffolding becomes a key to the student's success in both in this bit-by-bit manner. So if you think of scaffolding, you can think of perhaps one little small building block that's fundamental, and you're adding onto it another piece of information and building upon that, adding on another piece of information on top of that as well. So that scaffolding aspect is really important, especially in the online environment, because you are faced with different opportunities as well as challenges for learning. As we look at patterning techniques, this is one that's highly used in music and the arts. So we can think of these as how we connect different things. So it might be connecting actual patterns of observation. So it might be notes and a huge cluster of notes, notes in a melodic line. There's patterns that we can see. There's certain tasks that we use over and over again, repetition. Those are patterning ideas that the brain can take in and quickly adapt to in a new scenario if it's something that they can see that is similar to a different discipline or that they've done it, that has been done in the past. So finally, we have the apprenticeship model. And Helen talks about that, you know, we're very familiar with the apprenticeship model in music. So it's this master apprenticeship exchange that happens. And it's sharing of knowledge and ideas and skills so that a deeper understanding of systems and beliefs and values can be exchanged over time between the mentor or the master and the apprentice. As we shift into the online environment, these approaches are still relevant, even though we use them in the face-to-face environment. So we need to think about how we can use those elements in the online environment. So moving forward, we're going to look at how this happens in regards to presence, design, and technology. The big question is why? Why do we want students to be motivated in online learning? And probably the answer to that is so that they can learn, so that they can expand their music performance abilities, they can expand their music knowledge and understanding. And then the second question becomes, how can we motivate students to continue learning in the online environment, especially when music is a very practice-based subject. So as we look and move forward into the presence in online learning, we can see that learning happens in different places. And different places meaning there's the cognitive presence that has to happen, there's the social presence that has to happen, as well as teaching presence. On the screen, this is resembled by 3 large circles of cognitive presence, social presence, and teaching presence that overlap each other and form a nexus in the center. And in the center, we call it the sweet spot of learning. So as you think of teaching face-to-face, you teach about cognitive things, you teach about the content, and that's how students get connected to the content. In music, we have social presence happening when students are exchanging and talking amongst themselves, talking with the teacher. There's that exchange of social presence. And then the teaching presence is a huge part of the piece where we actually have the teaching that's happening being the design, the organization, the variability of perhaps scheduling, and the overall large constructs that are going to form and be the foundation for learning in the online environment. So we need to make sure that all of these are addressed as we're teaching in the online environment. So what I'm going to do today is really, I'm blushing over all of the online learning, really the theories and things like that, and coming and bringing to you just some very kind of think of it as overarching ideas. So there's a lot underneath, like an iceberg, and we're just hitting the very tip. So as we look and move forward, let's talk about some design aspects. So as you're looking to design your music class in the online environment, organization becomes really, really important. On the screen here, I've created a diagram that is a triangle, and within it there's 4 triangles. So at the very top there is one triangle making up the tip, the pointy part, and that's universal design for learning. The bottom left-hand corner triangle is intuitive and predictable. And then this triangle that's in the center of this equilateral triangle is the learning scaffolds. And then on the far right side, filling out the larger equilateral triangle is organized structure. So as we look to organize structure first, you want to consider how everything is organized and framed for your students. I've placed a number of questions that you can ask yourself about your class to help you get a really firm structure. So for example, some of the questions are, how is the class organized? So are you teaching in a semester base, or is it a year-long base? Or perhaps it's workshops. You need to ask yourself that, because that's going to help plan for the next question, which is, what are the learning outcomes? So are the learning outcomes going to be needed to achieve within a workshop, which might only be an hour long, or is it a semester or a year-long class? The objectives can then be broken down, if it's a year-long class, into a number of different chunks, if you will, or smaller components, so that you can scaffold them. What online learning tools are you going to be needing to organize your students? Another question is, how often should students access your online area? So that's speaking to the expectations and structuring expectations for students. Looking at what are the main components for the online area. So how are you going to organize your online area? Are you going to use content folders? Are you going to organize them by theme? What's the title of each folder going to be? Now this sounds really detailed, but it's part of the organized structure, which then leads into our next area of the triangle, which is intuitive and predictable. So what you want to create is a boundary or a predictable area of exploration for your students. And so this means that you're going to be asking your students how they know or how to motivate them to come into the online area. So encouraging them to access the online area perhaps Monday through Friday and say, you know, the weekends are off. You don't need to do that. We do know that research says that taking one day off a week from work actually helps get our mind and our body into a healthy and well-being state to take back to work for the next 6 days. Keeping that in mind. Hopefully we're able to enjoy that on our weekends. So the other thing is creating intuitive and predictable learning in the online environment for music is, do the students need to come in at a specific time to log in? That means that you having a live synchronous session? Do you need to have a password protected Zoom link? Is it the same link every time? I know for me, I make sure that I have the same link for students so that they are not left out in cybersphere lonely and frustrated because they can't get back. So those are some of the things that I create in an intuitive and predictable manner. There's a number of other questions that you can address as well. As we look at the learning scaffolds, again, I was seeding in those scaffold ideas, talking about the intuitive design, but it's all about making sure that your content leads to assessment outcomes, your learning objectives are actually mapped to the content. There's all of this large interweaving that needs to happen. And it actually helps when you're sitting down. You can, I often write out a timeline or a long line on my paper, and the beginning is the beginning of the timeline is the beginning of the semester. The end of semester is at the other end of the line. And what are my goals for my students? And then I can break that down into learning concepts. And then I break it down into audio or video and what graphics need to happen. And then I can actually see that my folder system or my themes or however my modules are going to construct for that online class will form. So that might be a helpful idea for you. So other ideas of chunking your learning for your students becomes that learning scaffold, talking about synchronous or asynchronous, what's important for your students, knowing your students and how to scaffold that learning is really key. And it's also different for different types of music teaching. So music performance, where you're actually having online lessons, you're going to have a different experience, and you're probably going to want a lot more live sessions, and how to scaffold for students is going to be a bit different than per se when you're doing something like music history or music theory. So again, it's within the discipline, and then within the discipline's discipline, we're looking at very different things within music. And finally, universal design for learning. I went and kind of gave a little hint about that, talking about video and audio. But universal design for learning is a theory that's pretty huge and big, and especially in the online learning context, it becomes really important because it talks about that we want to make sure that our students can show us what they know in the online environment, as well as we can engage with our students in the content through multiple means of representation. Now that sounds kind of jargony, and what does that mean? It means that we're actually ensuring that our students have graphics, text, video, and audio available for them to learn from. So when I go and create a couple of videos, which I did last night for my semester that's coming up, I actually created a little bit of a script so that my students, if they want to, they can actually read the text as opposed to watch the video. Now we know that a lot of students nowadays love watching videos, but there are some students that would, they know their learning approach that works best for them, and so they might want to have those text pieces. I've put out an example of what I have done for design in what my Zoom classes and live sessions. And here you can see on the next slide that it says, "Welcome everyone." And then there's a description of let's use the chat area to say hello while we prepare to start. And live streaming starts at 9 a.m. And then there's a picture of a clock that's analog, and it says 9 o'clock. So I'm giving students both text and the visual. They're linking together. This is really important, and there's a lot of theories, learning theories that go behind this, but your graphics need to match your text, your videos need to all come together and support and keep focused on the content. So this is just an example of what I've done. Now, as we move to the next slide, you're going to probably giggle, but this is one of my favorite graphics, pictures that I have, and it's taken from a coffee conversation that I had quite some number of years ago. But what you see are some white coffee cups, and in one white coffee cup is an elephant in the latte froth at the top, and then the second one there is a tree. And so think about this graphic. Where would you find this graphic if you were looking in an online learning area? If you thought that this would probably be found in the discussion area, you're right. And there is an elephant in the room. Absolutely. Thanks, Matt. So there's one of these things that I really enjoy taking pictures of things that are around me and bringing it into my classroom, so I'm personalizing it. I think it's really important that we do that in our online environment. And so this is one way that students also know that there's an open community available to chat and learn in the online environment. And so I encourage students to take pictures, post videos of themselves, all of those kind of things to interact and connect and create that presence. So right now, we're going to talk, or we're going to shift a little bit, and we're going to go into an app called Padlet. Now, we're not going to spend very much time here, but you can join the short collaborative activity by going to the link that appears on your screen, and I'm going to read it out for ease of access. And it's also put into the chat area by Laura. So the screen address is bit.ly/, the number 3, and then the small letter h, the or lowercase h, then a lowercase s, then a capital O, capital G, and a capital Z or Z, and a lowercase c. Now, as you go there, you're going to find that there's a number of apps that I started to list of how we can design for teaching presence, especially in music. So you might want to go and shift over there. And the great thing about it is it's collaborative. So you can add in, if you click the little plus sign on the screen in the Padlet area, you'll be able to add your favorite into the columns. So I have 5 columns listed. One is collaborating apps, one is discussion board interactivity, another is interactive assessment ideas, another is real-time interactivity, and the final one is recommended teaching apps for music. So that includes music notation, music production. And I know that there is a number of you out there who have your favorite apps. So what I would like you to do is take a moment. We're only going to have about 30 seconds, 45 seconds here. And I want you to add an app that you think is really a success point for you and your teaching, and add it to the Padlet, the wall. I can see that somebody is adding in there and typing in. What's your favorite real-time app? Clip-O-Matic. Ooh, I haven't heard of that one. Excellent. I can see that people are adding in more things, and it's for live captioning. That's great. So this will be up after the conference, and you can, our time together, you can continue to add to it. But it's one of the ways that we can feel community and presence. We're sharing our knowledge. So this is an example of a technology tool. that is a collaborative tool. There's also different types of apps that are really supportive of different ways of learning. So this one is a collaborative app. Another app, especially for music, would be something that you can help your students record themselves so they can learn and they can hear their recordings of themselves playing. So that's a really good one. We're going to go back now to the slides. And thank you so much to Francis for doing the magic behind the scenes. And one of the things that we encountered there is that I didn't go and specifically, I didn't scaffold us into the use of technology, especially in today's webinar. So did you feel a little bit disjointed or perhaps not fully participating or fully engaged in that technology piece? Because one of the things that we talked about in design is that you need it to be intuitive and predictable. And so I just kind of left it and said, we're going to go over here. And so you might have felt, oh, what's happening now? I don't understand, or maybe I don't have anything to add yet. Now that's one of the key items of why we need to design for the learning scaffold, the intuitive and predictive nature of teaching music online, as well as the universal design. All of those aspects come together, especially as we look at our technology. So I wanted you to encounter that just a little bit of awkwardness so that you know, oh yeah, I need to, if I'm going to introduce a technology tool, I need to make sure that I scaffold it into my students' learning. So here are 5 points that are really important when choosing a technology tool. One is identify the goal for using technology. My goal for using Padlet was, 1, you get to experience a collaborative app during the webinar. The other part is I wanted you to experience what it was like to have probably a new app to engage with others. And how to scaffold the technology is an important part. And so because I didn't fully scaffold that into our webinar, if I was teaching about the technology, if I was teaching us about collaboration, I would have scaffolded in a different way in our webinar. It's always good to use the technology together first and then ask students to use it individually. Having it, being able to ask questions together is always a really good thing. As well as you need to provide some technology outcome expectations. Let students know what they need to have as the end product. Because if they're looking to do an MP4, which is a video format, could they use any of the technology tools that they're used to, or do they need to use your certain technology tool? That becomes a really, that's almost a teaching philosophy piece to respond to. And finally, the technology choices is about synchronous or asynchronous, or does it need to be, can it be both? So on the next screen moving forward, there are some platforms for teaching. And so we have a number of apps listed, so learning management systems like Canvas and D2L, Moodle, and Blackboard. We can use websites for our teaching platform. We can use YouTube channels. We can use Vimeo, which is vimeo.com. It's a video production area. It's got video management, great analytics. Flat.io is also a music notation app, but it's also a platform for teaching, and because it can be a live collaborative app, and it also has plugins for LMS structures. Considerations when you're looking at platforms for teaching, you need to look at what is the technology level of my users. So things like if they're beginners, if they're advanced. Look at individual versus collaborative tools. Look at support of or distraction for the learning, cost of technology, app translation capabilities, as well as accessibility. key important items. Moving on to audio and video recording apps, you want to consider what are the technology needs for the use of the app. So that means that you're going to be using computer and the internet. You're going to be looking at perhaps headset and earbuds. You're going to be looking at the different aspects of microphones. I have a microphone here that I'm using that I find is a good microphone. You might want to figure out what's best for your teaching scenario. They will need the app and also the directions for use. So as you notice on this next screen of audio and video recording, there's going to need some helpful audio recording apps. And I've listed a few of them there. They include Audacity, GarageBand, Zoom, Screencast-O-Matic, a number of them. When I'm using technology for my teaching, I try to make sure that there's always direct communication. So as we move forward to the technology for direct communication slide, we can see that there's a number of apps that you can make available for students. And one of the communicating technology example apps that I have is Soundtrap. And I've used that with my students. I gave them the assignment that they were tasked with creating a record or a recording of an ensemble arrangement for their final project. I took them through and scaffolded into my actual teaching across the semester the use of Soundtrap before they actually had to use it for their final project. As we look to technology for direct communication, there are many, many apps as we move forward that are available to communicate with students for learning online. And a few of those apps are listed here. Just the obvious we're using is Zoom. You can use FaceTime, Skype, WhatsApp. There's a variety of apps that you can use, but think through why you want to be using a particular app. Remember, go back to those questions of what is the goal of the technology and what is the level of your technology level of your users, and why would you need to use that particular format. As we develop as we move forward and we're looking at the connection and community and of capacity for learning online, this becomes key because presence is really important. And given the seriousness of the pandemic and the lockdown that we are all going through, we've all gravitated to finding ways to connect online. And during this semester and teaching experience, we've had to find ways to connect and find community online, especially with our students in how we connect with them, whether it be weekly in a gathering, such as we had at the conservatorium. We did a weekly Zoom cohort chat so that students can connect and feel that they were part of that community. It's really important. So the idea of how this all comes together is really, really important, and how you make all of your learning not just connected, but accessible for all. So in the next slide, I look at considering presence for practice-based stream sessions. And I've put down a number of questions because I want you to be able to, personalize it for your context. A couple of the questions are, what is the main reason that you want to have your live stream session? Is it so that you can teach and show students in an instant manner, an instant interaction? That's a great reason to have a live stream session. But if it's just for reiterating what's in a textbook, probably not the best scenario. You could probably use that, create a video, students watch that, and then you use the live stream for discussions. Live stream is fantastic for letting students explore their personal interaction with the content and pulling out all of these creative ideas and helping to deepen the meaning of the content of the learning. So what amount of time is given to the breakout session versus teacher-led session? Part of the session? That's really important. Breakouts are key. Students that really enjoy them and it gives them time to chat with each other as well. And yes, there might be a little bit of lost leader time in there, but it's really important during this time that we're all teaching online that students have an opportunity to connect for health and well-being purposes, as well as it attaches, or it creates that sticky learning opportunity. As we move forward and we're getting to our final slides here, I just thought that I would create some key ideas for when you're creating presence in video communications. And design of teaching presence is perceived visually as well, and can be perceived visually. And so let's consider how, you need to have video on so people can see each other. It's important. We're used to seeing the whites of each other's eyes when we're seeing each other face to face. Or we're able to experience the closeness of each other in a room. Your background screen area, making sure that it's not cluttered, so that here you can see that I have a white wall behind me and a couple of my books that I use regularly on my desktop here. And those are things that are non-distracting. Your appearance and dress, you really do want to create a connection of what you're teaching to your students with, what you're wearing. If I rocked up in a bathrobe, probably not something that everybody would be thinking, oh, she's about to teach how to, or talk about how to teach online. We do associate appearance with topics. And finally, your body position on screen. And this is just a really brief one that people seem to enjoy. So right now I'm on your right side of the screen and I'm leaning over. If I'm looking beyond the camera and over to my far left, it looks like I'm talking to somebody off screen. And it feels like you can actually be part of the conversation. Now, if I move to the center of the screen, it's a little bit more of a static talk. I'm still looking into the camera, but it does feel a little bit different than when I come and I'm at the side and I ask you a question here, perhaps as I'm looking directly into the camera and then look again off screen. Small little things to think about. Finally, in my last slide here, looking at the practicalities of holding an online session. Timeliness, got to be on time. The conductor will start the show on time. And so we want to make sure that our classes start on time, and that helps with that learning intuitiveness and the predictability. Troubleshoot and help someone, with mics on and off, always having a housekeeping slide at the beginning of your live sessions. It's just helpful. It reminds students of some of the expectations of the online session. Have a protocol for your teaching sessions. Use the lock room function on Zoom, so that people, you can't be Zoom bombed or have people coming into the session without your awareness. And as well, if the texts are needed, make sure that you do have the copyright. Because we're in the online environment and sharing music, it can be so simple to, scan and send. But that's really not what we want. That's not good practice. We want to make sure that we're adhering to copyright for music and ensuring that everybody is getting paid for what they've created in the creative arts. Well, that has been such a really quick overview. I hope that's been helpful, and we have some time for questions. And I know that there's probably a lot of questions, and I'm hopefully able to address a couple. I see that everybody's excited about the Copyright Code of Conduct. Absolutely. We need, as musicians, as arts-based teachers, we need to uphold that. At the end of the day, we know that royalties, as being a musician, comes in when people actually are kept honest about when they play your music. So, we want to continue that.
Great. Thank you so much, Carol. That was just such a super practical session. And I think there were some really great tips in there. We'll go ahead and take some questions. now, but just a reminder, if you haven't already, please use the Q&A box in the dashboard on Zoom to send any questions through. We're just clarifying a question with Matthew at the moment, but in the meantime, I've got a question around, you spoke, today's session was very much about teaching music online and digitally, but as COVID is sort of affecting, and changing, we're moving into more hybrid models and hybrid ways of working. So I wonder if you have any ideas around how you can balance teaching online, but also teaching, in person as well, and how you balance some people being on screen and some people being in the room.
So the balance of, so I would say that for the best case scenario, if possible, that those two be separated. So you don't teach people in the room as well as teaching online, because somebody's going to feel the quote short end of the stick. And I've had it, I've experienced, I've even researched it. And your students online, if you put a camera at the wherever part of the room, they're going to feel like they're not part of the class. And actually, I've had in my research, students have remarked that the community in the classroom is a separate community to the community that's online. And they really they don't mix well. So my recommendation is, if you can, have it separate. Have the in-class scenario happen, and if you're going to have to do recordings of that, and then it becomes an asynchronous learning model for those who are online, that's great. But you're setting yourself up for challenge if you have to do them both at the same time.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. That's it's very difficult thing to manage the power balances in the room. Absolutely, that's wise advice. Thank you. So there is a question from Matthew Hill, which I don't know if you want to expand on it a bit further in the chat, Matthew, but it was really about any ideas about actual live internet musical collaboration. So whether you're teaching online and what that looks like.
Yeah, so we have a number of apps like BandLab and Band Hub, and how you can collaborate online with that. Again, it's if we're going to be using, for example, Zoom, because of the latency, that means the challenge of timing. If, for example, if I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. I'm sure you're hearing my my voice and my video not lining up. So that's the gift of latency that we get with teaching online. So if we were to sing or play as an ensemble in the online environment, works that are more out of time work really, really well. And there's been a number of choirs that have done works like that they sound more ethereal in nature. And so you can have people joining in from wherever, and if there's a lot of oohs and ahs, as long as there's not specific time pulse that has to occur, then it can work. The other way of performing in collaboration, and we've done this for a long time, is to actually do exchanges of MP4s or AIF files and send them to our producer, and you listen to the background track of the drumming bed, and then you lay your instruments on top of that in the studio or in the virtual studio, sending them in. So that's one of the things. I'm involved in a project in Italy, and right now they're working on the latency issue through LOLA, so LOLA, and you also have UltraGrid, ULTRAGRID, and then you also have even here Jack Trip. And so all of those allow for latency, but only within certain kilometer radius. So I think it's, anything broader than 400 kilometers right now, you're going to expand that 25 nanosecond or millisecond rather issue that our hearing will then hear it as out of time. So anything beyond that, we're not there yet. It's with the speed of light that we're challenged, and we can't yet change that.
Totally. It's almost a case of the technology not really keeping up. And Matthew says thanks. He actually tried a body percussion class and had real difficulties. So
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah, I get it. But there is some good point about it. I actually get my students to conduct. So we play our secondary instrument class. We learn a second instrument. And what I do is I have 7 students in the class, so it's not huge, but I have one student who actually conducts, and that person will conduct the person that's going to be our duet player. So then everybody gets to play at least in an ensemble, which is a duet. So it means that I have one player that's a conductor, one student that is going to be leading kind of leading the performance, and then if there's different parts, then everybody else gets to play those different parts and hear what it sounds like with that, with the one student. So that's the way I've gotten around it. But beyond duets, it doesn't really sound so great. But my students are actually learning to conduct well, because they're having to make sure their ictus is right on time, and keep an inner pulse. So that's been good.
So interesting. Thank you so much. I think that's provided a really practical, helpful response there. I think we've got time for maybe one more before we wrap up, which is actually a nice one to finish on as well. Just wanted to know whether teaching in the digital space has taught you anything that you haven't learned teaching in the physical space.
Absolutely. So the one thing that I can say for myself and that I've heard others echo is that teaching online will make you a better teacher, because sometimes we can come into the classroom and be a little maybe not as prepared as we know that we should. But in the online space, we really do need to have that preparation, and we get that opportunity, hopefully, to think through the design of how we're making our classes so they really are rich environments for our students, and we can ensure that they're accessible for all. There's inclusivity, all of those good points of teaching. We can really address that. And that's one of the things that I really enjoy about the online environment, is that I'm able to connect students to deepen their learning in a way that's personal and motivating for them.
Great, that's such a nice note to leave us on. Thank you so much, Carol. Unfortunately, we've definitely run out of time, but if you've still got any other questions and you'd like Carol to address those, you can send them through to us at leadershipprogram@australiacouncil.gov.au. And I think, Carol, you had your email on that last slide. If you're happy for us to share that, we can pop that in the chat as well. You can reach out to Carol directly.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. And thank you again for joining us. Just a few final notes before we go. Next week, you can join us again on Wednesday to hear from Jackie Bailey from BYP Group about how to best demonstrate your value and impact in an ever-evolving world. And then on Friday next week, we'll be hearing from Pacifica artist and leader Alec Reed from the New Wayfinders to discuss climate change and arts leadership, something that is really super present, but perhaps not really in the front of mind while we're thinking about COVID. So definitely something to come along to. We hope you'll join us. And finally, a quick reminder, if you haven't already done so, we'd really appreciate if you could complete our short midpoint survey to let us know what you think about Creative Connections and how we should continue. We'll post the link in the chat now as well. But until next time, thank you again for joining us today. Thank you, Carol, so much for such a practical and useful session on teaching music online and strategies around this. Thank you to Shavoy, our Auslan interpreter today, for holding the fort so strongly and getting through that whole hour, massive. And our live captioner, thank you for being here. My wonderful team behind the scenes. And of course, thank you to all of you for joining us. We hope to see you again soon. Bye for now.
Thanks, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.